Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. So on this beautiful Sunday morning, I think it can be a good idea to share a bit this topic, how I usually learn new libraries and frameworks as efficiently as possible in a way to become proficient for the job. So what I mean is that I will share how I usually have learned different libraries or frameworks during my career so that I am proficient as soon as possible. Some libraries I did learn because it was fun. I wanted to learn something new, but otherwise, most of them, if not for my main job, I've learned them for building side projects or for helping friends' businesses. So today in this video, I'm going to share that, and I think it might help you a lot if you are a student studying information systems, computer science, or you're a fresher, you want to learn your current stack as soon as possible and be efficient. And also, if you are a senior developer but you want to change a bit, let's say you work in ERP systems but you want to learn some web development, some front-end library, here is how I learn mine, and maybe this can help you. So let's get started. First and foremost, just to illustrate a few different libraries I've learned throughout my career is, for example, I've worked with .NET Framework, VCF, I've learned AngularJS, Angular eventually, I've also worked with Node.js, TypeScript, the usual PHP. I mean, if you've done web, you might at some point have done PHP, Laravel a little bit, Laravel, and then some Symfony as well, why not? And many others actually. And I've also learned Django, some Flask for my side hustles, and also from side projects for my friends, maybe on Rails. For my friends' project, I wanted to help them. And of course, at the time I was working with Node.js, but I think it can be a lot of code to write, and in terms of concurrency, well, it's debatable, but I eventually want to use Python and Ruby on Rails. So today, for that matter, I'm going to share how I would have learned React.js. I already know it, but here I think React.js, especially the documentation, it's very simple, it's well designed and easy to get into it. So I think it's a perfect example for me to showcase React.js as an example of the library that I would learn very quickly. So the tip here, the most important part obviously is to refer to the official documentation. Why? The main reason I think is that they are most up to date, and sometimes, every time, depending on the libraries, you will have their versioning. Here I don't see the versioning itself, but this helps keep in touch. Let's say you're working on an old version of React, let's say 16.7 before hooks, and you want the documentation, you can get it on the official documentation. Of course, it will be a bit some work differently from the default one, but the best tip I've found is to always refer to the official documentation. Previously I've worked on C#, and at some point I was referring to framework, actually the .NET framework, while I was working on the core version, the open source version, and the codes weren't really working well, and I lost time for nothing. While if I referred to the official .NET Core library, I would have solved it in a jiffy. So okay, let's continue. So first and foremost, you refer to the official documentation. Second, before anything else, you try to understand the concept. This is very important. And also, even before that, I would suggest try to why the library, why the framework. This is very important. Then try to understand the concepts behind. Even before trying a single line of code. Not to do, or not recommended. So I'll also have explain a bit on this later. So try to understand the concepts before trying a single line of code, and so don't hesitate to. This is very important to refer to the documentation multiple times. So that's recommended. So don't just go and try the codes out straight away before understanding anything. Just before understanding the core concepts. This is extremely important because it's so easy to get confused. Now I will take the example of React. It's super easy to get into it, like most front-end libraries, but whole frameworks like Java EE, ASP.NET, they are very complex. So try to understand the docs, the concepts first, refer to official documentation, understand why you need the what problem this library or framework is solving, and try to understand the concepts first, especially at a eagle view. This helps connect the dots before you actually start writing a line of code, and you will, if you do that, you will encounter what we call the tunnel vision. So you will get deep into the codes and you won't see how it relates to one part to another. So of course, don't hesitate to refer the docs multiple times. This is very relevant when working professionally, or when working maybe professionally or on your side hustles. Not recommended, just try to straight away. Don't check any random tutorial. First, it's very important that you first the official one. Okay, now in terms of when we talk efficiency, we talk efficiency. Yes, we talk 1 hour or maybe a couple of hours to get right into it. And actually, like simple libraries like React, Vue, Angular, I'm not sure, because you need to also learn TypeScript, and there are so many concepts right off the bat. So simple libraries like React, Vue, and maybe Svelte, you can learn them. You can become proficient in 2 hours. When I say proficient, so let's say you have a bug to fix, you can understand the library enough or the framework enough to fix the bug, or at least isolate it and understand how it is. So just take a sip of tea. It's burning hot. Okay, let's actually finally get into the React documentation. So first and foremost, it's very important why React. It's a library for web and native user interfaces. So it doesn't say anything. So it helps create user interfaces from components. So you build components. So it's called individual pieces, and you can do things like that. So here it's not bad actually. You get an idea what it does and how it works, but we will try this is a landing page actually. So getting started. But the good thing is indeed, what I like with those kind of libraries is that they are cross-browser, and even in the case of React, you can use React Native and Expo. I forgot about Expo. I only thought that there was React Native to build using React apps on Android and iOS, and more I don't know. Okay, that's very good. You have here and so on and so forth. So let's say I imagine myself wanting to learn React right from scratch. I come here on this website. What do I do next? So it's all good, but what I want is the technical documentation. This just gives me an introduction. It's good. Like I said, you can glance up to it. You have an idea of the syntax, and it's good. But now something I actually forgot to mention is that any library or framework will have requirements. But I'm talking a bit too fast today. So this is extremely important. First, understand the requirements, and maybe if you don't know them enough, you can use the same concept here like that I'm sharing. In fact, I didn't invent any of them. This is something that these are patterns that you learn when working professionally, or even at university if you do it enough, or even you work on side hustles. Any of these libraries or frameworks will have requirements that you need to understand, and it's very important. For example, for React, you need to know HTML, CSS, and also JavaScript quite well. And TypeScript, not necessarily, but if you want to learn it, it's important. In my opinion, it's far more important to learn JavaScript well, and then you switch to TypeScript. It's no problem, but if you don't know JavaScript, don't try to switch to learn TypeScript directly. Or maybe if you're already familiar with a OOP language like C# or Java, then perhaps you can do it. In my opinion, yes, you can do it perhaps that way. But JavaScript is good that you understand it before learning any other library or framework. So let's get started. Learn React and reference React. Let's click on Learn React. So this is perhaps what we are looking for. Let me just zoom the screen. Quick start. So welcome to the React documentation. This page will give you an introduction to 80% of the concepts that we learn. You will use on a daily basis. 80% of React concept. This is a keyword here. This is what we usually call the Pareto principle. Pareto principles mean that 20% of stuff affects 80%. So so let's learn it very quickly. The key here is to understand an overview of anything. Whether you're reading a technical article, a documentation, a video, or you're reading a book, it's very important to have an overview first, because this is how you prime your brain to know what to expect. And when you know what to expect, it's much easier to learn the content itself, but also read it as well. So here, the trick is you learn how to create and nest components, how to add markup and style, how to display data, how to render conditions and lists, how to respond to event and update the screen and share data. So you already can see that this is a very long page, and normally if you're going to read one by one, it can be a good idea, but one tip I find far more efficient is to just glance and have an idea of the concepts. Let's forget a bit about the codes right now, but rather the concepts. Creating and nesting components. Okay, like we saw earlier in the table. So we already have an idea of the syntax here. So we have examples, very good. Now it tells us a bit, and now we have two elements, so it's nested. Now we have styles, how these styles work, and how we are displaying data. That is JavaScript data. We use curly braces. Okay, we have already an idea how it works right off the bat, especially if you know HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So already you understand better what's happening without even writing a single line of code. So you can put like you see, you have your object here or your hash, and then you have this data, and you continue down, and you have conditional rendering. So here, what I really like with the official documentations of any library or framework, ideally, I found that this does not happen every time, but many libraries or frameworks will give you the best practices in the example, and that's very interesting. For example, here, for conditional rendering, it says that it can be a good technique. It's recommended. I'm not seeing the word recommended, but it's good that on the JavaScript side itself, you already determine the logic rather than only JSX part. So JSX, if you don't know, is a templating syntax for React that is similar to HTML, but like we just saw a bit earlier in the example, it has some nuances. So eventually we will get to that. So otherwise, you also have conditional. This is actually very relevant because in big projects you are going to be using this kind of conditional rendering a lot and a lot. So here, as a basic example, it suffices to understand what's happening, and even tomorrow, if you forget, you can always come back to this guide and understand and refer to it. This is how I actually do it. Now we have this, and you also have, if you don't have a S branch, okay, fair enough. So we continue. Now, of course, whenever we are rendering stuff, we need lists at some point or arrays. So here, for example, we have a list, and it goes like that. We map it here and we return it. And already there are certain patterns that we can notice without even having looked at the in depth the codes or even read the whole description. There are already some patterns that we see, and we can deduce them also from the title. And so far, what we've seen is that we are always returning an element. It should be a single element, then it can have other elements or components inside, but it should be one. Then we can separate it in different variables, for example, and we call it. So these are already the patterns that we see. And another pattern is that we use a function. I think this is the functional approach. Obviously, you can use class-based as well, but nowadays I don't think it's recommended. Export default function. So here we have it. You can also just define it, and below at the bottom you just put export default function and the function name. Okay, so we have an idea what's already happening here. We're just listing down these data and showing on the page, and here we have some colors, some conditional rendering. So this is a very good example. At first sight itself, it's enough to understand. And of course, when we talk about the web, the front end, we have events, and we need to respond to events. And of course, React, by its name itself, is React. We should react to events. So there are actually a few ways to do that, but the best, as always, is to use the recommended version. Another perk you will notice, of course, is that sometimes the best practices changes. They change. Let's say, for example, solution A is recommended, then in another release, solution B is recommended, and another release yet again is preferred. So maybe this is something that can be good to pay attention to. For here in this case, React, it's default. Voila, you have this, how to call this function on click, and you just do it. And now you want to update some information on the screen. Basically, have some state or some data, and you want to make it update automatically or dynamically. You use state. So it appears a bit strange, the syntax, but it's basically well, I'm trying to I forgot that I am putting myself in the shoes of someone who wants to learn React, but I'm actually explaining the concept, but it's the same thing. Here you have a default state, and here you have a setter. So the syntax appears a bit different because it's JavaScript, but it works quite. So it's just a template or a routine. How we say that? An API that you just use like that. So let's continue rather for a glance how you, by just getting a glance of a glance and try to understand how it works at a very top level. So for example, here you have state, you have the button, you have other components here, and you are calling the components. So you don't need to, in fact, what I found is if you try to go too deep at first interaction, your brain will fry it, especially if you're not super comfortable with the requirements. It's going to be very hard. For example, if I just started, I opened my editor, I tried to struggle to find around getting uh, the React on my machine, or maybe understanding how to use online platforms like Stackbleeze to start working on React. This can be very tiring at first thought, at first impression, or the first time you do it. And this is actually, I don't know if I mentioned it. Yeah, it's really relevant to that. Go and try the code straight away. It's not recommended. Rather, understand everything at the core level, how it relates to another. Oh, and then maybe another session you try to do it. Okay, so we understand better. Now we have something called hooks. It becomes more interesting. So we, even at this point right now, you don't need to fully understand what hooks does. Maybe you just understand the concept and how it relates to other concepts in React. So functions starting with use are called hooks. Use state is a built-in hook provided by React. Okay, so if it says that it is a built-in hook provided by React, so maybe that means that we can also build our own hooks. So we'll see later on if we have time, obviously. Now this is interesting because it gives us the level, a high level a diagram of how it works, this concept. So you have my app, you have two my button component, and here when you click on them, it is updated, so on and so forth. So it's interesting. And now it says that my button count. So however, you often will need components to share data and always update together. Yeah, it's very important, especially if you use a lot of nested components. So then how to do that? Then you can, the first way it seems to be here is to bring it up to one level to the parent component and then scroll it down. So okay, yeah, not bad at all. Or you can do, well, this is I think the recommended version when you use use state. Obviously another one is the use of context API, but we won't go into it right now. So that's it. Like you've seen, we've already went across and had a good glance or even a good overview of the whole React documentation, or really 80% of it. But it's enough, huh? If you are an absolute novice in React, I think just understanding what you've learned, what you've read here is enough at first point. Now, let's say you have 2 hours and already we took like 15 to maybe 20 minutes to understand what's happening. So once you've do this, what you want to do next is what? You have a lot of different ways to attack it. So maybe you will come here and copy paste it. For example, here you come here, function, my button, return, boom, and you try it. But even before that, you want to install it. So you have several ways to install React. For example, you need to install Node.js, and then you need to maybe install a CLI tool called Create React App. There's also Vite that you can use. But ideally, if there's a much shorter way to do it, for example, called Sandbox or Stackbase, use it. Use it so that you can practice. So next, what to do is to time box, maybe 1 hour or 2 hours on your calendar. If you can do it straight away, you do it, and you have an intensive session. It should be intensive so that you learn quicker and you recall the information that you're going to learn, especially the patterns that are here, much longer than usual. So intensive means no distraction, go and fight. Basically, just go and type the code. So let's say right now, just to get a feel of the syntax, this example, you copy paste it basically, you type it, function, or you can either type it or you can even write it down, it's no problem. Even writing down, I think it's better because when you write something down, you understand it better and of course you recall it more effectively. Once you've done that, you try this one as well. Don't just copy it mindlessly though. try to understand every word when you're copying them. If you don't understand it, so just do a Google search, because each of them are very important. Because one day when you have a bug, you will know where the bug is. For example, you have no idea what this line does, export default function, and tomorrow when you're calling your component, it's not calling because you have a lot of components in the same file, so you already know where the issue lies. Once you've done this, maybe copy paste this as well. But soon what you want to do next is you have a look at this, or maybe even the two above ones, these two snippets, because I think they can be quite a good example due to the fact they are very short. So what you want to do right now is to put it away, maybe close your laptop or something, and then from memory, either you can type it down or write it. Type or write without looking at the examples. And when you do that, most probably you won't do it well the first time. Try to understand what you didn't do well, because normally the thing that you didn't do well is related to maybe something you didn't understand. So for example here, what does symbols do, or why we have spaces, or why we have written. So maybe try to understand that, and eventually this will of course help you go in one direction, and that is to try to understand, to read the description on time, like just in time, rather than ahead of time. The ahead of time strategy would have been to read word by word everything. So like you see, it's very long guide, you would be very tired quickly, unless you have some incredible stamina. But a much more efficient way, especially if you want to become proficient within hours, is to use this. I've found myself, of course, I've tried different strategies, and these strategies, many of them I didn't invented, like I said, but rather I've experimented, and I've taken a few from a book called Ultra Learning by Scott Young. It's very, very effective book if you want to have so many strategies in it to learn very quickly. Okay, so here we have React components. Like I said, from scratch, you can hear, for example, let's try it myself. So function my button, bam bam, let's try it. You see here how much I get it, function my button. So normally in React you have the function should start with capital letter, then I think there was a return, spacing is wrong, and it should always return something, a single, yeah, then I think the text I forgot, and a button or something, so this is not good, should be a button. So here, don't hesitate to talk to yourself. Some people might think you're a bit weird. We as developers, programmers, software engineers, it's quite important. And a button to flow our thoughts. So let's see if I got it. How good did I get it? Function my button had curly, so I'm defining my button function, which is a component, and curly, and it's returning a button and button. So of course I've worked with React quite a lot of times, and like you saw, right straight away we'll see your weaknesses, and try to do this for many of the. I try to do this only for the basics one, because once you get the feel of the syntax, everything else becomes much easier. You can just think about what you want to do, and then you can translate it. Now let's say we have conditional markup, a point where it's a bit more information. Let's say you want to try something like that. So what you do is you have your button. Try to think separate from. This is very important actually, because this is what will force you to just take this for or const. This is name. This is what actually forces you to understand the code concepts and also to recall them better later when you need it. So name, for example, name Abdallah, and here I have curly braces. So I want to display this data here. Do I do it well? No. So does it work like that? Maybe yes, maybe no. So here we are talking in terms of scoping. If you have this, will have access to this. But this is how you learn. For example, let's say you want to learn. You try to experiment, but you do it without really. Once you've looked and understood the codes, the syntax, the concept, you don't copy and paste. You don't just copy and paste blindly. Maybe you can do it if the context is a bit difficult, but here is exactly why you shouldn't do it, because you're referring to the official documentation and it's very simple. It's so simple that you don't need to do it. You don't need to memorize it. This is a big mistake. You look at the codes, you understand it, and you try to replicate it. Don't look at it. Okay, this is a strategy that I'm not inventing or anything like that. I can't remember his name, but one of the biggest, most successful authors did this strategy itself. He bought well-known, popular magazines, and read it, and then tried to replicate the same thing. And of course, it had so many. It is how he found out that he had so many weaknesses. So this is a very good strategy. I've used it myself a lot of times before without really knowing that it is an actual strategy, and I've noticed it then in the book Ultra Learning, but I think it's very, very good. Of course, now I'm just going a bit further down is what we call drills. So drills in football or in sport is whenever you have some specific technique that you want to drill into, you want to become good in it. So basically, if you have a weakness, let's say football, you have your team don't really know how to pass the ball well, it's a weakness. So you can have drills, passing drills to pass the ball quickly, and you have people, maybe you have other players in between pressing them. So you improve your weakness. So for example here, like I said, for this football team, the weakness is passing. So similarly here, you figure out what your weakness is. Maybe you're not very at ease with logic, or maybe you're not very at ease with HTML. So you spend some time, maybe every day or once or twice a week, to work specifically on these weaknesses, and that's what we call drill. So it's possible that you don't really understand how the data moves from one scope to another scope. So you can improve on it. You can improve on it on your drills. Okay, so we continue. You continue similarly. Here, whenever you encounter a stumbling block, for example, you come here, you don't understand what source is. It's possible because maybe you're still at university, you're still freshers, first time you see it, or you've done only backend SQL stuff and it's first time you see it. So don't hesitate to go on Google or use your favorite AI tool and look for it. What does source mean? What does it mean? And you come back here and you do the same thing. Return, you want to, what it does is stuff is to display an image, and you do the same thing. A return, so always have the return. Here you have the image tag. So in HTML we have tags. React single one. Single one, what I mean is that instead of being like that, it is like that. Like a pure XHTML or XML code. Yeah, XML code rather. Okay, so here you can already see how it becomes more complex, how you can learn quicker when things go complex. So you do it intensively. At first, you might be feeling very tired, that's normal, but you keep doing it, you keep forcing yourself because eventually you will reach what we call flow state, and this is a state you normally reach. It depends on the people, on the person, on the environment, but normally you reach flow around 90 minutes, and automatically, whatever you're doing, even if it's hard, of course, it should not be too hard. Because let's say, for example, you are a software developer and you're learning uh, medical stuff, deep technical things. Of course, even after 90 minutes, you will be so overwhelmed that you won't be able to continue. So here, what I'm talking about is when you're learning something in your field that you can relate to, and 90 minutes should suffice for you to get into the flow. Of course, you need to avoid distraction. You need to focus on the work. If you have too many distractions, just keep your phone or turn it off or keep it in another room. Close all your Discord, Zoom, Slack notification, no Facebook or anything. Just put a headphone or earphone because this might help you get into the flow, and just focus. Continue to focus. You will feel that you understand better what's happening. You write it down, and you don't need to write everything down because these are simple examples that you can quickly write it, and within 2 hours or even less, you can get the hang of it in written form, and in a way that you will recall them. It's not just like you're mindless copying them, pasting them on your editor without trying to understand, or even trying to actively recall. The technique that I'm referring to is called active recall. Just active recall. So it's a learning strategy. Active recall is an effective study method that retrieves information from your brain. As you can see, it's very, very effective. It's actually the most effective one, and here I'm showing you for free how you can do it to learn a library of framework very quickly. So we continue moving at the same time. We should, like you have already. So this is very interesting actually. Since I've already primed my brain earlier today, I know what to expect. So I'm not really surprised. And second, once I get into the flow, I can readily respond to this information. I don't get overwhelmed and I can try it. So I look at it, I understand every line of code, in fact every word, function, my button function, handle, kick. So we have a function and a function, so it's basically a component, and I return it here. Okay, we have function here, and we are returning. So basically what I will do is maybe I could open a real editor. Have a function here, do something like component, for example, and here you have writing C# code. Here we are doing some stuff, and here as usual we return. It's basically the template. You can readily have the snippet. So what I was trying to do, what was I trying to do? I want to click a button. So okay, where's my button? You don't do it like that. Try to do it completely. I want to click the button. So I want to click the button and handle it like that. So here you have div. It doesn't matter if you make mistakes. This is the whole point. That you try to force your brain to create those. What is it? In your brain, there's relationship maybe in your brain, and then so that it becomes much easier. You know, you understand what you're learning, and you can recall it later on. So here we continue with it. So like it said, we have a button actually. So you get the gist. Very quickly to do, very fast, and it's the same for updating the screen. So I think it's already over almost 40 minutes in this video, quite a long video today because I'm not really coding anything, but just explaining how you can efficiently learn any library or framework. Now, this is very important. You've understood everything, you understand a little piece of code. You're quite efficient actually. You can, if you've completed this, maybe let's say it's so new for you, you took 2 days, 3 days, I think you're good enough to work on a real project that's not complicated. Of course, it uses the good regular pattern and uses hooks, for example, because it is described here in the official documentation. I think you're good enough. Then you have so many other things like you can see describing the UI, adding interactivity, and so on and so forth. So let's say today I've learned all of that. It's very good. And tomorrow I want to understand thinking in React. Okay, thinking in React. It's very good. Well, it's long as well. But before I do that, I come back to the first one and even do the same thing. Okay, just have a look to recall it better. So what did I do yesterday? As usual, I can just start with the table of content here, how to create a nest component, how to add markup, display. Okay, yeah, I remember all that. I can also have a look at the different snippets that I've created before. All of this seems really good. Then I can just go to the next. This is a big tutorial actually. It's very, very big. Try it once, but I then gave up because it's so long. Could easily take like 4 or 5 hours, even more. And then try to understand thinking in React, why we need to do that. React can change how you think about designs. Okay, the same thing. So you start with the mockup, break into UI, build static version first. This is very interesting actually. Whenever you are writing the front end, try to make it as static as possible. What I mean is just hard code any value you want, and then one by one you change the values. For example, you pass the props means properties down the different components, and you go like that. So find the minimal but complete. So this is maybe something I can note as a most recommended thinking optimization. There is even a saying in the IT world, premature optimization is the root of failure, something like that. Yeah. But if you're trying to optimize everything right off the bat, when you're still learning, it's going to be hard. And even if when you're creating a UI project first time, if you try to simply optimize everything, it won't work. That's for sure. I've seen it a lot. I've got into debate with what we call the ideal versus pragmatic programmers. So this is something a topic that I will definitely be recording into it later because I think it's very interesting. So I think this is it for a start. You can use this strategy to learn React, to learn other technologies like maybe Angular if you are very fond of it. You want to learn some backend, you can use the same thing. You go and try to get the overview, the .NET architecture, hello world, types, variables, program structure. It's a lot, yeah. C# is a much more complete language. It's huge because it has been existing for so many years. You can do the same to learn new things as well. So let's say you want to learn a mobile development framework, Flutter, for example. Flutter you can actually build for any screen. You use the same strategy. Okay, all of that, but how to get started, development, you learn in build mode with Flutter. So just follow the official documentation. Where is it? Actually get started. So here it is. And you need to understand how to install it and so on and so forth. Of course, you have requirements. For example, here it's Dart language, the Dart programming language. So it's good to know it. You don't need to know everything, but if you're learning Flutter, the concepts, the structures, the layout, and the programming language Dart at the same time, it's going to overwhelm you for sure. So maybe you learn the theory first, you learn how one part relates to another, and then you separately learn Dart, and then you improve. So it's like that for any framework or library that you're going to learn. And my team today was to be how to do it as efficient as possible and not get burnout and not get overwhelmed. So I hope this is a useful video. It's almost 45 minutes right now. And well, if I had maybe if I did a live, I could have questions. People, the audience could have asked me, and it would have been fun. So maybe one day I would do that. But I also have so many ideas, like a podcast, or continue with my more technical videos, like the algorithm one. Also, how to build stuff. Like, let's say I want to build something very quickly. How do I do that? I want to build a prototype. I want to do it like that. I want to host something. I can use, for example, Vercel and other technologies, or some technologies that are very good to do one thing. Others that are more general. So there is a lot to say about that, and maybe the tools I use. And it all depends on also at the target audience. It's all different. So I hope that you've enjoyed this video. And if you want it, if you find it useful, please like and subscribe. Bye.